we're going to start off with what we have planned for this morning, and of course, that is going to be our keynote speaker. All right. And of course, he's going to be speaking on the future of entrepreneurship. So, doing justice to our keynote speech is Paul Onwuanibe. He's going to be speaking on the future of entrepreneurship. Paul Onwuanibe is the founder and chief executive officer of Landmark Africa Group, a leading African real estate, hospitality, and lifestyle development company known for creating mixed-use destinations that combine business, leisure, and entertainment. Under his leadership, Landmark Africa has developed iconic projects including Landmark Lagos, Landmark Towers, and Landmark Beach, helping redefine the urban lifestyle and tourism experiences in Nigeria and across Africa. With a background in architecture, construction, project management, and property development, Paul is widely recognized for his contribution to Africa's real estate and infrastructure ecosystem. Founders Rant 1.0, are you ready for your keynote address?
Ladies and gentlemen, please make welcome our keynote address speaker, one and only Paul Onwuanibe. Please put your hands together, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you. I thought he said you could do better. All right, thank you very much. Thanks, everyone. So tell me, just trying to get an understanding, how many people are actual entrepreneurs and how many are aspiring entrepreneurs? I need to know whether I'm going to put people off or put people on. Hands in the air if you're already an entrepreneur. Hands in the air if you're aspiring to be an entrepreneur, thinking about it. All right, at the end of the day, tell me whether you're going to continue or not. So look, it's an absolute pleasure to be here. This is the group of people I love speaking to the most. I like to speak to people who, first of all, have guts, have desire, have will, and they say, I will never give up, I'll never stop. That's what an entrepreneur is, and that's the whole future of it. I think the last time I was here, I think was a TEDx event. And I did a talk on 360-degree turns of entrepreneurship. And this is my journey. I've been in this journey for about 30 years. And I am still here today where I was 30 years ago. And that's the life of an entrepreneur. So what do we actually think entrepreneurship is actually all about? So what I'm going to do over the next 25 to 30 minutes is paint a few pictures or stories with the hope that you would take away some things from it. So the first picture I'm going to paint is an animal picture. And the reason I call it an animal picture is that what is the most important ingredient in an entrepreneur? You know, I think it's foresight or insight. And the reason I want to tell this story as my first story is that the buffalo and the cow are two of many animals that can sense a storm coming. The biggest ingredient of an entrepreneur, if you want to be successful, you have to learn how to predict the future, right? And to predict the future, you have to play a part in creating it. Now, to predict that future, you must have some kind of perception or insight. So these two animals have an insight. And that insight is, I can sense a storm. But what do? When the buffalo senses a storm, it runs head-on into the storm. Yes? So it stays in the storm for a very short period of time, but it's very rigorous because it's running into the storm. What does the cow do? The cow runs away from the storm. The storm still catches up. It stays in the storm, it's less rigorous, but it stays a lot longer. In your life as an entrepreneur, you're going to have to decide when to be the buffalo and when to be the cow. Because you will go through both. The number of times you get that right will very much determine on how successful you will be. Now, those aspiring entrepreneurs in the room, you'll be asking yourself, well, but I'm not an animal. How does that help me? Well, oh gosh, someone did laugh. Well, you know, I describe entrepreneurship as an extreme sport. How many people here swim, run, cycle, tennis? So I bet you all think they're endurance sports, right? You know, you test the limits of your physical endurance. Well, you know, entrepreneurship is very similar. It doesn't just test your physical endurance. It tests your mental endurance. It tests your emotional endurance. But mostly, it tests your financial endurance. And the future of entrepreneurship means that you're going to have mental strength, physical strength, and certainly financial strength. If you want to be successful as an entrepreneur, the one thing that you have to have is the ability to stay in the game. So many people say to me, You know, entrepreneurship, entrepreneurs are sort of born, yes, not made. Who believes that concept? Entrepreneurs are born, not made. Okay. Oh gosh, everybody believes that entrepreneurs are made, not born. So the next few words I have to say are almost irrelevant. Because many people do believe, and I thought, 30 years ago, I thought entrepreneurs were born, not made. And I thought I was going to try this. And we've often heard stories of, the Aliko Dangotes of the world, Elon Musk, Bill Gates, Sarah Barkley, Oprah Winfrey, and we think they possess some magical touch, right, that makes them very successful. What you don't know are the stories of the failures, the challenges, the dreams, the hopes, the aspirations, the things that have gone right, the things that have gone wrong, right? And you realize that entrepreneurship is not a trait that's bestowed on the chosen few, right? It's something that you learn, you nurture, you work hard at, and you acquire those skills, right? So I agree with you, most of you in the room. Entrepreneurs are actually made, not born. It's not a gift. It's not a God-given gift. It's something you've got to literally work for. Now, I keep on talking about my 30 years. And so over these 30 years, there's certain things I've learned. And I'm going to spend some time talking about those things that I've learned. And I wish I had learned these things before the 30 years started. And I call them my 8 sort of principles. And they're probably the 8 best teachings I have learned in entrepreneurship. So I'll start with the first one. It's called success. There's no overnight success. So people see the brand, the buildings, the social media hype, and think, oh, all success. I know one of my friends walked into me there we are, walked into me in the green room and said, I want to be as successful as you. And I said, don't pray for yourself like that. So you want to be successful, right? Probably more, certainly more than me. So, success is not overnight. It's a journey and it's time, right? What you see at any point in time is not necessarily success, but the important thing about it is enjoy that journey. And there are many battles, there are many challenges, but also there are many opportunities. But the truth is success is not sudden, yes? I always say a bell is not a bell until it's rung. A song is not a song until it's sung. A drum is not a drum until it's been beaten, right? So the first thing you have to do as an entrepreneur is start. Start that journey. So I'm going to use this opportunity to tell you a little bit about myself for many of you that don't know. I know I have a number of my landmark team here, so there are a few of you that know me. But anyway, I was born circa 60 years ago, right? So I put myself at probably double the average age in this room, at the very least. So I was born in London to working class parents. My father was a diplomat. My mother was a journalist. And I just grew up, literally on the streets, thinking that life was simple and life, you flick a switch, a light comes on, you turn a tap, water comes out, you make your friends and you do the sorts of things that you try to enjoy, rode my bike when I was young, did all the things that little kids did. And then after some time, my mom asked me, what do you want to be, Paul? And I said, I want to be a dustbin driver. And she said, gosh, why? And I said, because I just like how dustbin drivers behave. I like how they come to houses where there are dogs. They're not afraid of the dogs. They roam around. They're always happy. They're singing songs. They're throwing bags into the cart. And she said, that's interesting. So, but what would that help you do in life? I said, I just want to be happy. So she told my dad. And at the age of 10, my dad packed me off to Nigeria. So I went to Federal Government College, Lagos. He put me in a boarding school in Nigeria at the age of 10. It was the first time I'd ever come to Nigeria. And I thought, wow, is this the reward for wanting to be a dustbin driver? So anyway, I got into Federal Government College, Lagos. And I tell this story because I said the song is not a song until it's sung, right? I went on hunger strike for at least a year. I didn't like it. I turned the light on, the light didn't come on. I turned the tap, water doesn't come out. I think, what on earth is going on in this country, right? But over time, you begin to see those challenges, and they're no longer challenges, they're opportunities. I made friends. I did things I never did in London, never had the chance. I had the chance to socialize with people that looked like me, that thought like me, that talked like me, right? I began to enjoy myself. And after about 3-4 years, I thought I didn't want to go. My time was coming up because in those days, secondary school was 5 years. And I was a year before finishing. And my dad was already preparing for me to come back to the UK to do my A-levels. He had put me in a school that there was a 5-year waiting list. And I was just meant to go to that school. But I wanted to go to university with my friends in Nigeria. Anyway, I went back to London to my A-levels. I came on holidays back to Nigeria. I secretly took the JAM exams. I chose the best subjects that I knew, which were maths, physics, and geography. I was quite good in those subjects. No other ones, but those three were excellent. I passed my JAM, and I had to now choose a university and a course. I chose an architecture course. I chose University of Nigeria because it had the name Nigeria in it. Didn't really know where it was or what it was doing, but I knew it had the name Nigeria. Are there any lions in the room? Oh, God. An aspiring entrepreneur. Sign on the dotted line now, right? Okay, so I went to University of Nigeria for 6 years, architecture. And it was about 3 years into the 6 years, I realized I didn't need to stay here for 6 years, but I had to, because what you start in life, you must finish, whether you like it or not. I always have fun when I speak to members of my team, especially the younger ones, and they say, well, I don't really like what I'm doing. I don't like my boss. I don't like my colleagues. I don't like where I sit. And I said, did you go to university? And they say, yes. Was it in Nigeria? I say, yes. How long did you spend there? 4 years, 5 years, 6 years. You spent 4 years in university? Did you go to toilet in university? Yes. Did you like it? Of course not. Did you like your lecturers? No. Did you like the classrooms? Were you uncomfortable? Did you have money? You go through so many challenges in university. But you know what you do? You find a way to finish it, right? And you find a way to finish it. Why? Because it's important to you. So why is it when it comes to business and their challenges, we give up? And in school, you don't, right? Now, the thing we talked about, the marathons and endurance sports, you can start a marathon, you don't have to finish it. But most people who start to finish it because they don't want to give up. The same thing with all endurance sports. Entrepreneurship is the same. Don't start it if you can't finish it. So there's a big lesson in that. I'll tell you a little bit more before I move on to my next slide. So I came back to London to work with an architectural practice, worked in this architectural practice for 3 years, joined a property development company for another few years. And then I met a guy called Mark Dixon at a train station. He used to come for coffee every day. And I was working at that train station as a project manager. We were doing some refurbishments. And he then said to me, he had this idea. He'd lost both his parents in a car accident, and he was the eldest of 3 children. And he said that they had a family bakery and he wanted to sell it to pursue this idea. And I thought that was just wild and crazy at the time. I was working for a living. This guy had just lost both his parents. He was in his mid to late 20s. And he was the eldest of the children. He was looking for a way to sustain his younger ones. And he wants to sell the family business so he can pursue a dream, which I thought was at best impractical. But every day I met him for about an hour, and he talked about it all the last time. And I thought, you know what, he might have some points. He wanted to create this worldwide business. He wanted to be to the office industry what the hotel is to the residential industry. And I thought, strange but interesting. Anyway, as time went on, he said, will you join this journey with me? And I thought, why would I want to do that, right? I have a well-paid job. I'm comfortable. At the end of every month, I get a salary. Don't worry, I'll moonlight. And he said, look, this is going to take all your time. Anyway, fast forward, I eventually joined him. And at the time, he wanted to recruit one person from every continent. So I was the African. So he recruited 6 other guys, right? I remember an American called Bob Goodrow, an Indian called Rudy Lobo, a Dutch guy called Job Dawn. And there were 6 of us, well, 6 plus me, 7. Right? And we started this journey, and it was actually quite interesting. Late nights, early mornings, cheap flights. And over the next 8 years, we opened 169 offices, right, in 67 countries. And someone clapped. And during that time, I learned a lot. That's what I call entrepreneur. Look, I know we started by talking about entrepreneurs are man-made and they're not born. But this guy was certainly born an entrepreneur, right? But he made people like me entrepreneurs, because I just loved every bit of that journey. I loved the adrenaline. I loved the hard times. I looked at the challenges. It made me look at challenges in a very different way. When people see challenges, and I told the story of how I first came to Nigeria, and I turned on a light switch and light didn't come, and you turn a tap and water didn't come out. Those are challenges, but suddenly they become opportunities, right? And that's what he taught me. Anyway, about 2 to 3 years into that journey, he asked us to take 5% equity in the company. And some of us did, and some of us didn't. I had a mortgage to pay, a family to feed. So a little bit more about that later. I'll finish that story later on. But I tell that story just for the sake of entrepreneurs, is that every single day, right, you wake up in the morning, you don't know what's going to come next, right? It's okay not knowing what's going to come next. But what you've got to do, if you want to predict the future, you've got to help create it. So you've got to do everything you need to do to create that future. So that moves me on to the next philosophy, or next thing I wish I had learned, right? And it basically says that entrepreneurship is not a job. So, most of you are entrepreneurs in the room, you actually understand that it's not a job, it's a lifestyle, right? You wake up in the morning, you think about it. It's the thing that wakes you up in the morning, it's also the same thing that puts you to bed at night, right? So why is entrepreneurship a lifestyle and not a job? Because it actually consumes you. You think about it all the time. And when you forget it, the business reminds you that it's still here, right? So while you're eating, whilst you're at dinner, whilst you're playing, whilst you're socializing, it's with you. So those of you who want to be entrepreneurs, or who think you're entrepreneurs, but you're moonlighting entrepreneurship, there's only one way to do this thing. You've got to jump in with 2 feet. It's not a side hustle. It's a mainstream job, and it's a mainstream lifestyle. There's something the British conquerors used to do. So when the Brits were going around conquering the world, they would go to these foreign islands, and they would try to conquer these islands. But to conquer these islands, they'll go by boat, obviously, and they arrive at the shore. And to conquer these islands was tough, because the weather was tough, there was malaria, there were things that they were not necessarily used to. And sometimes there were hostile indigents that they had to take over, right? And they knew that if they had an option to leave, they would leave. So what they did, they burned the boat. So it's a common phrase in entrepreneurship. When you decide to do it, burn the boat. You know what that means? You don't have a way back. You must stay to the end. Because, we always say the most successful entrepreneurs are not the ones that are the most intelligent. They're not the strongest. What are the most successful entrepreneurs? They're the ones willing to be more adaptable to change, more responsive to change, the ones that are willing to stay in the game to the very end, right? Because I'm pretty sure that what distinguishes successful people from unsuccessful people are those that are willing to go the full mile. So this is actually a seriously long ball game. So, which brings me on to my third thing. So everything that people talk about in entrepreneurship is money, right? Either you want to make money, or you don't have money, or you need to raise money, or you need to pay back money, or you need to borrow money, or you need money from friends or family, right? And we draw these fancy spreadsheets, we do all these valuations, and it looks all very well, it looks good, right? But when you start this journey and you're in it, you realize that cash is king. I said I was going to tell this story when I was thinking about what to say today, and I told my ear. My ear said, "Please don't tell that story. They won't even get it." I said, "I'm going to tell the story. So please, clap, laugh, or anything. Just make sure you prove her wrong." So when I went to business school, it was our first class in business school, and sitting there were probably 80, 90 of us in the room. This lecturer walks in, an American guy, really famous American professor. His name was Michael Porter. He wrote a book on the value chain analysis. He walks in and he says, "What makes businesses succeed and fail?" And all of us smart business school guys, first day in business school, we had all sorts of things: strategy, human beings, staff, economics, macros, micros, just intelligent things, as it will be. And he says, "Nope, nope, nope, nope." And at the end, nobody got it. He said, "Cash." He said cash. When you run out of cash, you run out of rope. When you run out of rope, you've run out of luck. The business is dead. You must have cash. Cash flow is king. Now, I thought that was just business school stuff, right? But I got into entrepreneurship, and I realized cash is everything. Profit is academic. Cash is real, right? So cash is the money you make every day, right? It's not the money you write in the books. It's not the money you sort of count. So as they say, cash flow is reality, profit is theory. Now I'm going to finish that story of when Mark Dixon, my former boss, said, "Take 5% of the company." So 3 guys took 5%. The Indian guy, of course, Rudy Lobo, said, "I'll take the 5%, I'll work for free for 1 year." Bob Goodrow, the American guy, was actually Mexican. He took the 5%. And then Joop Dawn, the Dutch guy, who was the European guy, took the 5%. I said, "Look, Mark, I have a family to feed. a mortgage to pay, children to have. I said, I wish I could, but it's okay. If you can't pay me, you can owe me. But I'd rather have the salary than the bonus. Anyway, so that's how we went on. We did this thing. 8 years later, we had built, as I said, 167 offices in 69 countries. And we then went to the stock exchange and floated simultaneously on the New York Stock Exchange and the London Stock Exchange for $8 billion. The guys that took the 5% had $70 million checks on the spot. I had a handshake, a pat on the back, and a thank you very much, Paul. I mean, that was a serious lesson, right? But that's true. You didn't even laugh at my business school thing. You didn't prove it wrong. Anyway, thank you very much. So that was a big lesson I learned. And the lesson here is, there are no regrets. In entrepreneurship, you can't regret. Whatever you do, don't regret it. It's gone. You've done it, right? It's a lesson. It's knowledge. You park it, right? It's a story you will tell to somebody else another day, right? When this happened to me, for a few minutes or a few hours. Let me say for a few weeks or months, right? I was affected, right? Because I remember Rudy Lobo, the Indian guy, was a good friend of mine. I used to go to his house. And he lived in this backward place. I'd spent all my money doing my house up. And I thought, you have $70 million now, right? And, I just couldn't get it out of my head. And I remember walking into Mark's office and saying, look, Mark, I don't even know. I can't even think. I can't come to work again. I would have been $70 million rich. He said, Paul, why don't you try it yourself? And I thought, wow, that's true. And that's how Landmark was created. I said, I'm going to do this in myself. So we started. How did we start? I opened an office in the best building on the best street in the best part of the city in London, in Mayfair. And I thought I wanted to ooze confidence and desire and stuff. And I wanted to help those businesses that Mark wasn't willing to help. Mark was looking for corporate businesses. I was looking for the one-man band entrepreneur businesses who needed office support. So I wanted to give them the prestige of a good address. So I opened my office, I remember it was 1 Hanover Square in Mayfair in London. And I did all the things that entrepreneurs do, right? Then there was no social media, right? So it was a little bit harder. I went to Bloomberg and Financial Times and spent all my money advertising and stuff like that. Didn't work. I went broke very quickly, right? I remember knocking on my wife's door and saying, look, I'm broke, but you're going to have to find a way to give me money. Gosh, I tell you something. It's not easy being funded by your wife. Sorry, that was just a memory. I wasn't meant to say that, right? But so every time she gave me money, she said, but what did you do with the last one? Yeah? And I said, you know what, just put me on a salary. And that was the hardest discussion we had, but it was the easiest thing to do. So she put me on a salary. The funny thing about it is that when we started becoming successful, she forgot to take me off the salary. But anyway, so he put me on the salary and we kept on going. So one day, I woke up and I thought, look, this was so difficult. I had these 3 people that I worked with at the time, at the very beginning in Landmark, and we just sat down and waited for customers to come through the door. So entrepreneurship is not just about the idea, it's about bringing the people in. People have to buy the product, and sometimes the people are out there, and they're out there, but you can't find them, and I looked for them on Bloomberg, on Financial Times and stuff. Didn't work. So eventually, I went to a printer, and I printed these boards, and I said, your office in London for $100, your office in Mayfair for $100 a month, right? And I went to lampposts around London and tied them onto lampposts, and I tell you something, this thing was electric. My phone did not stop ringing. These 3 girls that worked for me, they had to literally work overtime. And we had to find a way to convert these people. It was incredible. It was a bout of good luck. But you know what they say? Increase your surface area for luck. Create a fertile ground so luck can manifest itself, right? So I just got lucky. But that increase of surface area for luck, it defies the notion that luck is by chance. It means that you can make luck happen, right? The harder you work, the luckier you get. So I got lucky. And that was the beginning of how Landmark started at the time becoming successful. So we then went to the other European countries. I went to Paris in France, Brussels in Belgium, Geneva in Switzerland, Prague, Praha in Prague. And we went to quite a few of these places, and we were reasonably lucky. But I had a bloody nose in probably 4 or 5 of them. I remember Frankfurt was particularly annoying. I think Prague and London were the places that did well. Paris was annoying, Brussels was annoying. I then partnered with someone in Tokyo who had an absolute bloody nose. I almost gave up at that time. I lost all the money I made in London and Prague, in all these other places, looking for geographic spread. Which brings me on to my next topic, which is failure. Yeah? You will fail more than once, right? And what does failure actually mean? Failure is a lesson that prepares you for success, right? It's a challenge and challenge and challenge where you consider it failure. So you make bad decisions, you either hire wrong people, you have wrong partners, you go to wrong places, right? It's practice. We call it failure. Who knows Michael Jordan in the room? Yeah, one of the most famous basketballers that walked planet Earth. So Michael Jordan, did you know that he was in high school? He was kicked out of his high school basketball team. Can you imagine that coach, where that coach is, that kicked him out of a basketball team, said he wasn't good enough, right? But you know what Michael Jordan thought? He didn't consider it failure. He thought to himself, what do I do with this? He went and he practiced and practiced and practiced. I heard him speak some time ago, and Michael Jordan said, I have missed 900 shots. I have lost 300 games. 26 times I've been given the opportunity for the match-winning shot, and I've missed it. I have failed, and failed again, but that's why I'm a success. So I remember that on that I took my business out of Europe. I kept London, sold all the other offices, and said I'm moving to America. America just has to be great, because that was the story. Moved to New York, got into this lovely building in the World Trade Center, set up my offices on the 87th floor. Incredibly proud. More about that later. So this is not a therapy session. So a lot more about that later. So as I said, failure prepares you for success. Yes. So you will make bad decisions, and you will make some good decisions. And as long as the number of good decisions you make, right, produce results better than the pain of the bad decision, you will succeed. So it's okay to be wrong. It's okay to take a risk. What's it Walt Disney said? You miss 100% of the shots you don't take, right? So don't be afraid of failure. Take the shots anyway. Yes? And I really wish someone had told me that a long time ago. I would have had a lot more shots. Which brings me on to the next. So whilst you go from failure to failure without a loss of enthusiasm, there's something you do need, and it's called resilience. We talk about it a lot. I think I saw an interview the other day by our president saying that Nigerians are the most resilient people on earth, right? And, you know, it's actually true. Resilience is not something that you're taught. Resilience is something you decide to be, right? It's something that's inside you. And I'll tell you a couple of stories. So let me finish my World Trade Center story. I know it's not a therapy session, but I'll finish it anyway. So I had this this nice office, spent all my money that I'd gotten from Europe, and you could look out of the building and see on the left side, the West Way River. On the right side, the Eastern River. Opposite us was the Millennium Hilton. And I remember going to work one morning, and I think it was about 8:30, 9 a.m., crossing the Westway Highway. And I was Nigerian and lazy, so about 100 yards down the road, there's a traffic light. Call them pelican lights. You press a button so it stops, and then you jump across. But I didn't like to do that. I didn't want to walk 100 yards and walk 100 yards back. I used to run across the West Highway. But, you know, it's a 4-lane highway. So it takes some time. You get to the middle and you're about running across. And one morning I was doing that. It was September the 11th, 2001. And then a plane was in the air. And the building right next to mine, a plane hit the building. At that time, we thought it was an accident. Didn't really know what had happened. I was in the middle of the 2 lanes when it happened. And I thought, wow. So I wanted to go back instead of going into my building to have a better view, because you know when something's so tall, you can't really see the top. So I went back, and there was this church behind, and these guys drinking beer at 8 a.m. in the morning, right? They sleep in the churchyard. And so I asked, what happened? And he said, a plane fell into that building. I thought, oh gosh, another drunk. I'm going to go back to office. So I then tried to run across the road again. And by the time I got the road, the second plane came and hit the second building. But that was my building. That was the realization. Everything else is a blur, and it's not a therapy session, so I'm not going to relive the whole thing, right? But I lost 7 of my staff. I lost my entire investment. I lost the entire business. The American government only paid compensation to the American companies. I was a British registered company, and it was tough. So I had to make a decision there and then, and the decision was, this is Africa. It's time for Africa. So it reminds me it reminds me of the 360-degree turns, as I said, I spoke here at the TEDx conference. So I thought to myself, I spent 5 years in secondary school here, 6 years university. I mean, surely I must still have friends. And I came back and I made all those phone calls. And, some bothered to answer and some didn't. That's the way life is, right? I remember, but I, begged, borrowed, and I did everything but steal, right? Raised a little bit more money, came to Nigeria, and we opened this service office business, and it was reasonably successful because at the time a lot of international companies were looking to come into Africa. I remember my first office, I opened it at the Africa Rebuild, and another one just down the road in Ikoyi. And then it got quite well, but I thought to myself, this place is tough because when you have landlords that are over your head, you can't really do business very well. I needed to build my own, but I needed a piece of land. I needed to find that land. So I remember I used my last money to hire a helicopter and flew around Lagos, said we need to find a real piece of land. Everything's so congested. And I remember flying over Lagos and thinking, you have this residential area in Ikoyi that's sort of serene and everybody likes. And you had this bustling business district in Victoria Island. And then there was a growing residential corridor down this Lekki corridor. And there was this place in between. And I thought, what the hell is this? Why is nobody here? They said, don't land the helicopter there, right? They will steal you. I was told there was a place called Morocco. Anyway, I said, landed, let's see. Because there was water, there were no roads, there was nothing there. But there were great things on both sides. The nearest thing to us was Zenith Bank, which was being built, Mobile, and then the Pounds was being built. And I thought, land the helicopter, negotiated with the royal family, came up with a deal, went back to America, went to go and speak to Morgan Stanley, told them all sorts of stories about Nigeria, the growth, all the companies that want to come, the reason why I'm different, right? Got them to fly down, paid $17 million in 2006 for this piece of land. Great fun. Spent the next 20 years, and I'll tell you a few more stories about this, building this land up. We built it into the most visited business, leisure, and lifestyle destination on the West African coast. So the reason we tell this story about resilience is that some of you may know, literally 2 years ago, almost to the day, someone thought it was a great idea to run the first kilometer of a 700-kilometer road past not just the biggest and the best, but certainly the fastest growing, but the busiest and most visited leisure destination in West Africa. And I remember I was on a cruise ship, my brother's 60th birthday, when I got a WhatsApp message saying you have 7 days to get out of here. And I thought, I can't move out of my bedroom in 7 days, let alone the place I've been for 20 years. But it's not a therapy session, so should we move on? But the story here of resilience is, look, it's a journey, and we're going through that journey, right? We take it on the chin, right? You know what they say, thieves don't break into empty houses, right? So what has happened, and we decided, how do we move forward, right? We're going to go ahead and still build something. So let's, I think, was it Einstein who said, when his factory burnt, he said, disaster is an opportunity to start again, but even bigger and better. And I thought, rather than lie down, let's do that. We had lost 3,500 jobs. We'd lost $30 million in asset value. We'd lost $10 million a year in income. We'd lost 80 different businesses. And I thought, the only way to be a real entrepreneur and to show that you won't be defeated is to continue, right? But do it bigger and better. So over the next, hopefully, 2 to 3 years, we're going to roll out across the entire West African coast a whole series of business, leisure, and lifestyle destinations that are as good as the one we just finished. But remember, it's a journey. It's not success. So when you say you want to be like me, don't owe the bank that kind of money and stand here and talk to people, right? I'm looking in the room. I'm thinking my bank manager could be in any corner here, thinking, look, Paul, get off the stage and go and work, right? But it is what it is. So what's my next lesson? The next lesson in business, we call it focus. Does anybody recognize this picture? Oh, wow, some of you recognize the picture. Where's Natasha? Clap for Natasha, she chose this picture. So focus is about doing something and concentrating on it. If you need any superpower in life, let your superpower be focus. Pick one thing, do it well, do it in a way nobody else can, and then scale it, right? Many of us do 50 things. We say, oh gosh, I'm a social media. Nkiri, what was it you told me before? What did you say you did in your 1 year again? Huh? I want to be an influencer. I want to create different apps. I want to build real estate. I want to teach some young kids. It's okay to do quite a few things, but eventually you need to find the one closest to your heart. You need to focus on it. You can't do that many things very well, right? So I'm a big believer in focus. So when people say, oh God, I've got this business, the number of people have come up to me and said, look, oil and gas, petroleum, financial services, I don't do any of it. Every single thing I do under the Landmark brand. Everything I do has to be something I know about, has to be real estate inclined, right? And the only time I've diverted is for those of you who've watched the Lions Den program, is when I had to help entrepreneurs. And that was an interesting and an amazing experience because you learn a lot, because I was outside my comfort zone and my box for the first time, and I loved it. Any of the entrepreneurs that I refused to fund in this room? just want to make sure, because I don't have a bulletproof vest. So I was going to tell the Samsung story, but because of time, I only have about 6 minutes left. So the next tool I wish I'd been taught, right, is the tool of people matter, right? So a lot of people talk about businesses, about strategy, about tactics, about macro environment. You know what? People. If you have the right people, you do excellently. If you have the wrong people, you do terribly. If you choose the wrong partners, you're in trouble. If you have the wrong mentor, you're going down the wrong way, right? If you deal with the wrong people, you get hurt. If you deal with the right people, so spend your effort, your energy, your time in making ordinary people do extraordinary things. The biggest mistake some of us entrepreneurs make is we look for exceptional people. There's nothing called exceptional. Someone's exceptional in one business may not be exceptional in your business, right? Look for ordinary people who have some intelligence but have passion, and make them do extraordinary things. I'll tell you a quick story. So when we set up Landmark, over about 10, 15 years, I tried to explain this whole leisure concept, that leisure is an experience. It's not about buildings, it's not about infrastructure, it's about how you treat people, how you make people come. We have a simple dream in Landmark. We say, bring as many people here as possible, give them as great a time as possible, and make sure they tell other people, right? And that's our philosophy. And I kept on teaching people, and some people got it, but very few didn't. Sorry, a few people got it, but many didn't. So one day I thought, I'll bite the bullet. I chartered an aircraft, hired a 7-star resort in Dubai, and flew my entire organization to Dubai. I kept them in this resort for 7 days, right? And I said, just enjoy yourselves, right? But when we finish, you're going to go back, and you're going to make other people have this experience back in Nigeria. And I tell you something, it was incredibly expensive, but till date, it's the best decision I have ever made, right? Because ordinary people started doing extraordinary things. Nothing about Landmark is about what I did. Everything is about what these people did, right? And every day they went into the well and they found water, right? So people. If there's anything you want to take away from here, I know there's a sort of quiz that says, what are you going to take away from here? This is the one I want you to take away. People make a big difference. And lastly, I want to talk about opportunity. So those of you who've heard me speak won't be surprised I'll be talking about opportunity. Opportunity in Nigeria is the other side of challenges, right? If you're looking for opportunity, look for the challenges, right? Then now, once you find the challenges, then you say to yourself, how do you solve these challenges? And are these challenges that are faced by many people or few? So if you solve the challenges for many people, and you do it in a way that very few people can, so it's so unique and so good, yeah? People can't stop talking about you. You will be successful. Take that to the bank, right? So, but the thing about opportunity, unfortunately, it's time sensitive. Yeah? They say opportunity comes but once, grab it or you lose your chance. So one of the things I always say is that the opportunity of a lifetime can only be realized in the lifetime of that opportunity. The opportunity of a lifetime can only be realized of that opportunity. It's time sensitive. So grab your opportunity when you see it. Don't wait until you have kids, till you're richer, till you have better friends, till you get married. Just grab the opportunity, do it. Don't be afraid to fail, but do it. So I like to close. And on closing, I'll say I said earlier, the people who win are not always the smartest, and they're not always the strongest. They're the ones who refuse to stop. So that's another lesson I want you to take here. Just stay in the game. Yes? Don't stop. Yeah? So if you're in this room and you're overworked, you're underpaid, you're tired, you're doubting yourself, you're in the right room. Because 30 years later, I'm still there. Overworked, underpaid, doubting myself. But I know that both you and I are exactly where we need to be to make the change we want to see. Thank you very much.
Please put your hands together for Mr. Paul Onwuanibe. That was such an amazing and enlightening session. Please put your hands together one more time. Thank you so much.
Once again, good morning. So, as usual, right, it's best that we also get to ask him some questions because I know some of us have some burning questions I would love to ask. So, we're just going to pick numbers. We can only attend to 5 questions.
Thank you very much. My name is Bukayo. You spoke about people, and people would be about systems in the laundromat structure. So my question is, what are your unique systems that allows you to achieve your goal very quickly? And like you said, the opportunity is in the lifetime of that opportunity. So what are unique systems that helps you achieve your goals very quickly to the end game? Thank you.
Yes, it's a very good question. Because last time I was asked that question, I think I was taking a BSc exam. So I would say it's not about unique systems, right? It's more about self-motivation, perception, gut feeling. And it's okay for your gut feeling to be wrong, right? But you only find out your gut feeling is wrong after you've played out your gut, right? So I would say that if there's one process or system that you need, it's that ability to take risks, yeah? And because that way you educate yourself on what is wrong and what worked for you. So that's one. The second is, learn from other people. You don't have to fail, right, to understand success. You can learn, they say success has clues, right? So you can read things that other people do and understand what made them succeed, understand the mistakes other people have made so you don't have to make the same mistakes. So that I would say is the second. The third is adaptability, is just be prepared. Be prepared. The fact that it works for someone doesn't mean it will work for you, but just know when to adapt and when to change the game. You know what they say, that you can't change the cards you're dealt, but you can change the hand you play, right? So whatever it comes to you, choose your hand, right? And those unique circumstances. And don't be afraid to choose that hand. It may work, it may not.
All right, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much, sir. My name is Adiboye. I'm an aspiring entrepreneur. I'm about to build Nomad Vet, veterinary service business. So you mentioned something about people. People matter more than strategy. Yes. How do you build relationships without making it look like you're expecting something from someone? How do you build relationship? Probably you can just give us an example of relationship building in your own scenario or something. So just to understand how we build relationships. Thank you very much.
First of all, whatever it is you're trying to do, if it's about animals, you do well, right? I have 2 dogs, and I could be one of your clients. So for those of you who've heard me speak, I speak about networking relentlessly, right? And I think if there's any game changer that I've gone through in life, it's because I've gotten out of my comfort zone, and I've networked at times when it seems more difficult to network than not. Most people in rooms like this sit next to people they know, right? Most people ask for advice from people they know. Most people don't talk to people they don't know, right? But sometimes when you go out of your comfort zone and you speak to people, you can sometimes become a beneficiary of the goodwill of those people. Some of the opportunities that I have not taken have been because I have failed to network. A lot of the opportunities and a lot of the goodwill that has been shown to me have been on the basis that I have gotten out of that comfort zone. So, networking relentlessly, is not a buzzword. It's really this entrepreneurship game. And if you think, oh gosh, I'm an indoor person, I don't really like it, nobody likes it. Nobody actually is comfortable speaking to people they don't know. But there are books written on this. I've talked about one of the books called The Strength of Weak Ties. And it basically says that you're more likely to have your life changed by someone you met by chance than someone who you know or see every day. Family, friends, work colleagues, sports mates, gym buddies won't change your life. They give you good advice or bad advice, right? The people who will change your life are people you meet by chance at a train station, at a coffee shop, on the streets, in the supermarket, at a movie house, maybe even at a nightclub, right? Right? But so I would say that if there was, I won't call it a superpower, but if there was something that you're uncomfortable about, that you should be comfortable about, it's networking.
Okay, so before we get to number 4, so that's a cue for you to make sure that at least you meet 5 new people here before you leave, at the very least, because you don't know who's going to be your next investor or client.
Okay, hello, sir. Good morning. My name is Pamela Williams, and your story is one I am very intrigued by. And my question is this. When the demolition happened, at what point did you decide to expand rather than retreat? And what made that the right call in your mind? And also, how did you protect your mental clarity as a founder when external forces like the government and institutions were actively working against your vision? Because, I mean, that was $17 million gone and a whole lot of investment. So how did you stay sane? Because I know I would have run mad at some point. Well, yeah, I just want to know.
All right, thanks, Pam. Sanity is a choice, right? So it's okay to grieve. It's okay to rant. It's okay to be unhappy. There's nothing wrong with it. When people say, "Why are you shouting?" I say, "Because I want to." Right? Nothing wrong with it. Yeah. You can't control everything, but you can control how you react. So when all is done and dusted, when you finish shouting, when you finish grieving, you've got to do something. You can't grieve forever. You can't shout forever. You can't be angry forever. Right? People can take what you have, but they can't take who you are. Right? So I think in life, it's all about context and perspective. You've got to find a way to unwrap the challenge in front of you and look for the opportunity. Look, during this period, I tell you, we lost a lot, and I regret it. I wish it never happened. But on the other side of that coin, we had so much empathy and sympathy. I'm still trying to figure out how to turn that to equity, right? But we had so much. I had calls from so many people. I had 3 African presidents call me. I didn't even know them. They got their embassies to find out and said, "Look, come to my country. If your country doesn't want you, come to mine," right? I had 17 different state governors call and say, "Look, Lagos is a useless place. Come to Jos, come to Enugu, come to Port Harcourt," right? So you're going to have so much opportunity amongst disaster, right? But if you spend your time grieving, you won't see it. So grieve, finish grieving, lock that door, and start again. Remember what Einstein said.
Thank you so much for that.
My name is Eunice. I manage the startup portfolio at Kickoff Capital. And Paul, you're such a great storyteller. You've told very hard stories with so much humor. We've had to laugh about it. So thank you for telling us your story and telling it so beautifully. One thing I find with founders is a thing around decision fatigue. I think Pamela mentioned something around that. But I want to talk about it more broadly. How do you know when this is a roadblock or this is a dead end? Like knowing when the plane crashed at your beginning in WTC that, oh, you had to move out of here, and not deciding to leave real estate and go into something else, deciding to move into Africa. So what's like your mental, how do you process that this is a roadblock or this is a dead end? What skills have you had to learn to identify these things, and how do you manage them? Thank you.
Yeah, it's a good question. You've almost asked the same question that Pamela asked, right? In a different way, but it's a really good question. I said the last time I was in this hall was at a TEDx event, and I did a talk on 360-degree turns. And that's the thing about life. There's no wrong or right, but do something. Just doing nothing is not an option, right? So you're going to get to the end of the road. Some people, what you're calling the end of the road may be the beginning of the road for other people, right? It's all about context and perception. So the point is, as long as you continue to do something, you see a lot of people get into paralysis, right? So they analyze and they're trying to make sure a decision is right. And you overanalyze and you end up never doing anything. The one thing in life I say is just do it. Just do it. And it doesn't matter. If it fails, you'll have the chance to do it again, right? But just do it. So every time I've had a situation where I know I have to make a 360-degree turn or I have to pivot or do something, I grieve for whatever reason, for whatever length of period, and I know I've got to do something because, I burned the boat. I jumped in with 2 feet. There's no going back. I know I have to go forward. So it's sink or swim, right? So, and I think that's the people who say, you know what, enough is enough. They have options. They either have rich parents or they have a day job. Yeah. If you don't have a day job and you don't have rich parents and you are obsessed with the desire to succeed, then you will do something, right? Doesn't mean you'll succeed immediately, but eventually you'll succeed. Successful entrepreneurs are the ones who stay in the game the longest.
Hi, sir. So, my name is Munirat, and I want to ask a very, very honest question. As what would be your advice to somebody building a product or a service that is not meant for Nigeria? Like the target audience is basically the US, UK, while in Nigeria, and you're finding it difficult for them to accept because obviously they feel you are bringing a cheap labor to them. So, what would actually be your honest advice for that founder?
I see in that question there's laced with all sorts of innuendo. So, one thing I'll say, I often talk about the 5 tools of success, and one of those tools is understand your market. I always say, a lion on land is probably the best hunting animal on land, and a shark is probably the best at sea. But if you take the lion to the sea and the shark to the land, they suddenly can't hunt, right? So you actually need to know where you're hunting. You need to understand that market. You need to understand what the people want. Entrepreneurship is not limited by geography, and it's not limited by position. You can be anywhere and do things. As a matter of fact, the most successful companies in the world are companies. Look, Microsoft is in Seattle. I've been to Seattle. It's a bedroom city, right? But their product is successful all over the world, right? It's why it's such a good, and you can say that for almost every successful company. So where you are is not as important as knowing your market and understanding that market. So I would say, some of the easiest people to sell to. Look, I grew up in the UK, and until date, I still live in the UK. The British people are some of the easiest people in the world to sell to if you have a good idea and you do it in a quality way, right? So as long as it's quality, it's a good idea, it solves the problems. Just remember, whatever you do it so well and so uniquely that other people can't copy you. Yeah? If you get that right, you would sell abroad, right? There's no luck out there. It's literally, the product has to speak for itself.
All right, number 7.
Thank you so much, sir. I registered for this event after seeing the podcast you made with PCTME. Was very, very great, sir. And thank you for the session. So I recently invested. My name is Olajide Daniel. I'm a filmmaker. So I watched the 9/11 documentary, and hearing you speak about the whole incident actually, blew my mind. So I recently invested in a business that I've been doing my whole life, and it failed, hopefully. So thinking again about the next thing I want to do with my life is actually very confusing. Courage to actually still put more money into the same business that I do is kind of scary. So gaining clarity for someone like me who is going through this phase, what would you say? Thank you.
Thanks, and well done. You're one of many. You start a business, fail, but you to be one of the few, you have to start again, right? So I think it was on one of my slides. I said, courage doesn't always roar like a lion, right? Sometimes there's a little voice in your head that says, go to bed, get a rest, and wake up tomorrow with more energy, right? So courage doesn't mean just go bang, 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 right? So when you say, do you have the courage? Of course you do. But let it all sink in and figure out how you're going to start again. The second piece of advice I would give is, do something and something you're passionate about, right? And the reason why those two things matter is because if you're passionate about it, you'll stay in the game. If you're not, you won't, right? You need knowledge about it, and you need to know about it, not just know that it makes money. The reason you do that is so you can do it in a way that nobody else can, and you can be unique in your own way, right? Outside those two things, nothing else really matters, right? apart from obviously whatever it is you're doing, the market has to buy it, right? So it has to be a good idea of some sort. So I would say, take a deep breath, write down a list of all the things you know, all the things you're passionate about. You're obviously a creative, because if you're a filmmaker, I've worked with a lot of filmmakers, so you must be incredibly talented. So you'll have many options. And then figure out the people you need in your stable. Who do you need around you, either as partners, advisors, friends that will support you, and then roll the dice. Does that resonate? Sounds easier said than done. I know. It's always like that, yeah. But roll the dice. I think it was it Walt Disney that said no? It was a former it was Winston Churchill, right? One thing you've got to do is start. Without commitment, you'll never start. Without consistency, you will never finish. But you must have the commitment to start. So don't start until you're committed, right? And when you have the commitment, start. And enjoy the journey. Yeah.
Good morning, sir. My name is Joshua Alani. I'm the founder of Advocate, a media and storytelling company. So I started with my brother, and primarily source of fund has been from myself working as a product designer. We're at a phase where for us to take on bigger jobs and deliver amazing stores for bigger clients, we need excellent people to work on stuff. But because just in the journey of building credibility, we need to give discounts to founders, to businesses, for them to trust us, for us to do job for them, do stores for them. So once we've given those large amount of discount, it's not enough for me to now hire other people to work with us. So I'm at a phase where, because I've discounted, I now have to do the job myself, or my brother has to do the job. And I'm also trying to make more money from my own product design career. So what would be your advice for me? How should we manage this phase where we want to grow, want to hire more people that can do that can do great work, so that we can get bigger clients, but we're at a phase where we're giving discounts, we can't hire them, we now have to do it ourselves, and we are not able to move very fast?
No, it's a really great question. I'm glad we had more time that you asked this question. Because, it's on the lips and on the minds of every single entrepreneur, is how do I square the circle? How do I pay the people to come and do the things that I can't afford to pay for, right? But I think you should Sheyi, by the way, and the people like Sheyi who find ways to put in extraordinary events like this, right? And you get so many sponsors, you get so many people with a lot of passion, so many volunteers. And in business, you have to find that same way to bring people who are willing to volunteer and who are willing to follow that journey. But the one question I always ask myself, would you rather have 100% of nothing or 1% of something? So sometimes you have to share, right? Sometimes you're going to have to bring people on and you're going to have to give them a piece of the pie, right? The only reason that Landmark exists today is because I was offered to share by my former boss, and I declined. Right? If I had accepted, as a matter of fact, by the way, Regis as a company is still going on there. Rudy Lobo, who took the 5% and who made $70 million, still works there. Still works at that place with that money. Yeah. So you've got to make that decision. A very difficult decision, by the way, is do I need other people here? Because I can't pay with money, I have to pay with equity, right? And just figure out how you choose the right people, because there's nothing worse than the wrong person in your business, because you will later spend 100 times that money buying them out, right? So that's the big decision you have to make, is how do I share, right? How do I, first of all, get people to do something for nothing? And when I explore that and I get to the limit, how do I then, what do I have to share to get what I need?
Well done, Mr. Paul. I think you've spoken to us really brilliantly. Thank you so much. I was going to ask a question. Yes, please, let's clap for Mr. Paul. Thank you. So you see, it was good you took my question. Yes, so quickly, my name is Temia Delano, and I'm the founder of Hairline. It's a venture studio and wellness garden that's particularly focused on next generation women. So we're thinking, how do you empower the next generation and get them ready? So my question was going to be more like what is asked, very close to what is asked, and it's going to be on pivoting and scaling. So I've been running this for a bit, about 3 years now, and I think we've pivoted twice, just ensuring that we act this thing, because it's kind of really pioneering in the ecosystem. When you know you're sure that you have to pivot, and you also know that it's time to scale, in those times, you have to take your time. You have to it's like a bow and a sling. You have to take a sling back. What do you advise in seasons and times like that, where you have to cut down on talent, on hires, and ensure that you're just getting this right? What do you advise a founder at that level? Because I know that because of kind of women I deal with and founders, there are a lot of people in that particular place. Let's use the word season. So what do you advise for people in that, in that place? Thank you.
I have a question for you first. Okay. What's a next generation woman?
A next generation woman is a woman who is in her prime and is just out of, mostly we do, so let me come back. A next generation woman is a woman who is in her prime, a woman who is out of secondary school, postgraduate, undergraduate entrepreneurs, and a woman who is just trying to understand the next phase of her life. And so why we name them that is, why that's what they're called. Now, what we do is, how do you ensure that this next generation woman fits into the ecosystem on the long run? It means you need to build that, create the facilities, the ecosystem, and we provide an academy called SUSA Academy. We also have a community called the TNN Club, and we've created a couple things in place: a mentor-tutor partner relationship, just to ensure that women fit into startups, they fit into the ecosystem generally, and they can be productive. So we want next generation big thinking women. So that's what we do.
All right, I get it. Yeah. So it looks like you've asked the question and you've answered it yourself, basically. Okay. Yeah. So sometimes we actually have the answer to our questions inside, but sometimes we're afraid to bring it out, or we want that endorsement from outside. Pivoting is not about a moment or a time. It's about a feeling, right? You pivot when you've gone one direction and you now need to go another direction. You don't pivot because I've reached a certain time in my life, or I've reached a moment, or I think, I'm now 26 years old, I need to do something else. That's not why you pivot. Those people fail, right? You pivot when you have to. It's an action as a result of an action, right? So you don't need to be taught when to pivot. You know. When my colleagues got $70 million checks and I got a handshake, I knew it was time to pivot. Yeah. When the plane went into my building, I knew it was time to pivot. I probably didn't tell you the other stories. We built a building in Libya, in the former American embassy site. When the war broke out in 2011, it was bombed. I knew it was time to pivot. When someone drove a road right through Landmark, I knew it was time to pivot, right? When I came out of secondary school and my parents said I should come back to the UK and go to university, I knew it was time to pivot. So it's a moment in time. You just know, right? The issue is that not many people have the courage to do it because they're afraid of the unknown, right? So you've got to train yourself to not be afraid of the unknown. If you're 26, you have never been 27, but you don't say, I'm going to die at the end of the year. Yeah, you choose to go into 27, right? So I would say that, again, I'm trying to recall a quote, which basically says, if you can't change your mind, you can't change anything. Yeah, don't ever be afraid of changing your mind. Yeah, change is a necessary event in one's life, right? So you've got to find ways, right, to make changes when you've either reached the end of a road or you need to do something different, yeah? And it's okay if the change you make doesn't produce desired results. At least you made that change and you can make it again.
Thank you so much. Just so we wrap the question, based on the topic, the future of entrepreneurship, a couple of us here still have, I'd say 15, 20 years, on this journey. So it's a 2-in-1 question. What are the things we need to look forward to? Because, when you're starting your journey, there are a couple of things you probably know now that you didn't know before. But what is changing? And now there's AI in the loop. What are the things we need to look forward to? And at what point, what are the things we're going to see for us to make that informed decision to say, we're done?
Well, when they build your coffin. But so what are the things to look forward to? And you're right, Shay, it's such a good question. You know, I was literally going to pull you up and say, I'm not going to get off the seat until you ask me a question. But like the lady said, you know, life is changing. Every day you wake up, there's change. You know, people are becoming more, I was about to say inquisitive, but people want more all the time, right? People want more, they want it faster, they want it better, they want it quicker, they want it cheaper, right? And that's changing the world. The population growth, urbanization is changing the world, technology is changing the world. People are looking for solutions all the time. Like you say, AI was created by us. It wasn't dropped on us, right? And the person who creates the next thing could be in this room today, right? But if you're going to be in this room, then you have to know that the world is changing. They say the best entrepreneurs or the most successful people in life are people who can predict the future, right? And if you don't have a crystal ball to predict the future, then what's the next best thing? You got to help create it. And to help create it, you've got to decide what it is that people will want in the future. The problem with life is so many people are stuck in the now, right? And I often say this in real estate. If you're a real estate guy in this room, the one thing you've got to be able to do is predict the future. It takes a long time to build real estate. So when you start building it, you can't be building it for what's happening today. You have to be building it for what's happening tomorrow and where those people are coming. So I often say to people, find out where the people are going and get there first. Right? So AI is just one of those other things. I've spoken a lot about it, and you know, it's an opportunity and a threat, right? And it's an opportunity if you grab it and embrace it, and it's a threat if you're afraid of it and complain about it. So I think in life, you know, anything you complain about and don't embrace becomes a threat. And I'm not saying you should embrace everything, right? You can complain and not embrace, but just know it's a threat, so you need to mitigate against it. Yes? And you always have to see the other side of the coin. So it's so important in life to actually see the opportunity of everything, the other side of the coin. There's the good and the bad for everything. I always say, or was it Natasha says, I'll never know hot until there's cold. Yes? You can't talk about being tall until you've seen short. And that's the thing, there's good and bad. So, you know, change is just something that we've got to embrace. You know, adaptability and having the ability to move from one thing to another, it's something we've got to get used to in life, right? And with AI, it's accelerating that thing many folds, right? So a lot of things that we used to do ourselves before are being done in seconds at the press of a button. Well, look, when I went to school, we barely had calculators, right? We had something called the logbooks. Nobody in this room is my age. Well, did someone say, yeah? I use the logbook. You don't look my age, right? So there were no calculators, there were no computers. You had something called the logbook, and you had to learn to count in base 2. And, you know, the world has changed. And, you know, it's not that long ago. It's 35, 40 years ago. The world has changed so fast in the last 40 years, and it's going to change. And in the last 5 years, has even been faster, right? You know, I often tell people, when I went to university, I had a lot of friends reading computer science. And it was just becoming very popular then. So many people, just the same way now people are going into sort of AI and media and stuff. You know, and they had never seen a computer. They were in school reading a course, and they'd never seen a computer in real life. They were reading it in a book. You know, many of them came out and they're now bankers and stuff, right? But many of them actually did the computer science thing and are progressing it. But, you know, so I think you must be willing to adapt to change. There's nothing wrong with being afraid of the unknown and the unexpected, yes? But don't let it deter you from taking the step. Yeah?
Thank you so much, sir. I'm sorry, forgive me. I will need your insight also on this. It is also, it's one of the trending topics over the last 2 weeks about Nigerians not being employable. I would love to know your stance and what do you think about right now the talent this country is producing? About few days back, they cut Jump score mark to 150. I remember my first call was 186. Till now, my parents didn't see that score because my dad has seen it. They have killed me. You know, somehow I just found my way to lie, and you know, my second was like 220. And I can imagine, you know, breaking, like, you know, cutting it down to 150. The educational system, of course, is not really helping to produce a brilliant set of people, majorly because it's not up to standard. And basically, so I don't overflog it. What's your stance on Nigerians not being employable and the conversation?
Someone said, So you want to get controversial here? So don't worry. I love controversy. I embrace it. So the next time the elections come around, make sure you vote. Right? Don't be one of those that sit back and complain. So look, there are 200 million plus people in the country. I hate generalists. I don't like generalisms. I have employed 3,500 people at Landmark, and I found them here in Nigeria. We don't employ foreigners. We've built a company in Nigeria for Nigerians by Nigerians. Have they all been brilliant? Of course not, right? But I've seen people who have come in bad turn good, and people who have come in good turn bad. So this is a country that allows people to be as mediocre as they like, or be as excellent as they like, right? And the issue is, how many people actually have the self-motivation to realize that excellence actually does matter, right? The things that you sit down, you watch TV, you go on social media, you look at the politicians, and you say, he made it, and he did it overnight. So I'm not willing to do the things that should be done to get those things. And that's the problem. The problem is short-termism and nothing else. I wouldn't be as brazen to say Nigerians are unemployable. I've worked in 4 continents and at least 67 countries. And I have never been in a country that has people as hardworking and as inventive and as intentional as Nigerians. Nigerians have something special. But we've got to find a way to bottle it up, right? And use it to our benefit. When it comes to crime, we're good. When it comes to sports, we're good. When it comes to education, we're good. And when it comes to businesses, we're good, right? So we're good at everything, the good and the bad, yeah? But we've just got to find a way to motivate it and to put it in the right direction. I was saying the other day, I hate generalisms, right? Because people often use the outlier as the main thing. The reality is, the outlier is not as important as the main thing. With 200 million people, I think I had a slide up there and I said, find a way to make ordinary people do extraordinary things, So let it be one person at a time. Everybody you have the chance to influence them in the right way. There are no shortcuts. My first slide was about success. It's not overnight. That's the truth. I defy anybody, unless you're prepared to steal. If you're prepared to steal, it doesn't matter. You're in the wrong room, right? If you're prepared to steal or then you can take the shortcuts. And yes, you may be successful for a period of time. I often talk about my 2 fallacies. Again, things that I wish someone had told me a long time ago. And the first fallacy, I call it the just world fallacy, where, good is rewarded and evil is punished. I found out after 60 years it's not true. Good is not always rewarded and evil is not always punished, right? You just have to roll with the punches. You got to decide, are you going to be good or are you going to be evil? And if you decide you're going to be good, then stay good, irrespective of whether you're rewarded, right? And if you're going to be evil, then go to the other room, right? And the second one is called the balance theory, right? The balance fallacy. We're brought up to feel that spend your time doing, 24 hours in a day, 8 hours sleeping, 8 hours socializing, 8 hours working, all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy and stuff like that, right? But I put it to you that if you want to be in the top 1% in the world, you're going to sacrifice. You cannot prioritize balance over sacrifice. You're going to have to go the extra mile to do the things other people don't want to do, right? And that's life here, right? We all want to be in the top 1% of the top 1%, but the fact that you're sitting here, by the way, means you have clothes on your back, you have a roof over your head, you have some change in your pockets. You're in the top 1% of the world anyway. But to actually be successful, you need to be in the top 1% of the top 1%, and that requires sacrifice. So one person at a time, find a way to convince and to help other people to be better. And then suddenly, more and more people will be better. But do we have the DNA and the ability to do well? Yes, we do. Yes? And I think we can be one of the greatest nations on earth. But, remember how I ended my thing? I said, you're exactly where you need to be to make the change you want to see. When the elections come around, vote. Huh?
Thank you so much. Please, a round of applause for Mr. Paul.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Mr. Paul Onwuanibe, that's the CEO, Landmark Africa Group.